Suppose I have an application which takes an input from the user and performs some complex time-consuming computation on it and returns the result to the user. Now, because the computation is time-consuming, the response time from the server will be high, which is undesirable. So one improvement that we can do here is that every time the application performs this computation on an input, it will store the result of the computation to a component. Let's call it a component for now. And for every subsequent request, instead of performing the computation, it would first query the component to check if the result of that input has already been computed. If it is so, it would simply fetch the pre-computed result from it and would send it to the user without performing the computation. Otherwise, it will perform the computation and store the result to the cache. Okay? This is what we call caching. Okay? And this component in which we store the results is called a cache. This will reduce the average response time of the server. That means this will improve the latency. Okay? Let me give you one more example. Suppose there is a client, a server, and a database. Now suppose for every request from the client, the server queries the database and then it processes the data received from the database and then it sends the processed data to the client. Now, querying a database is a time-consuming operation. So again, the server can cache the result of the query. And then, for every subsequent request, it will first check the cache for the data instead of querying the database. This will not just reduce the average response time of the server, but it will also reduce the load on the database. And hence your system will become more robust. By the way, this cache doesn't have to be an independent component. Caching can also be done in memory inside the server. Now, should you perform caching in memory or on a separate hardware completely depends on your application. But generally in distributed systems, a separate hardware is used for the cache. Okay? So basically a cache is a component that stores data so that future requests can be served faster. And by the way, caching can be done in a lot of different places in a system. Now, we just saw two examples where we performed caching on the server, but the caching can be done on the client side as well. For example, suppose your website has some static content that won't change, like images, icons, or static text. What you can do is you can cache this static content at the client side such that it no longer has to request the server for it. This will improve the user experience as it will help load the page faster. So you can use caching at the client side as well. Similarly, you can use caching at the database level. In fact, almost all the standard database management systems perform caching such that the expensive queries don't need to be executed again. Okay? So caching can be used at various levels in your system to make your overall system faster and robust.